had said in their questions. We'll try to answer those as well. My expectation is, before we get into the content, is that the vast majority of people who watch the next 20, 25 minutes aren't watching it live, and will pick it up on a Facebook, or excuse me, a YouTube download or view over the next couple of days. But I believe it's important information. You know, a lot of what's going on about within government and the response to this pandemic has been about cutbacks and about what I would generally call negative things in terms of the local government's ability to respond to the reopening of the economy. What we're doing here in Galion is a little bit cutting against the grain, swimming upstream a little bit, but very much convinced that actions taken by council on some pretty decent ideas that they were offered will help the Galion area respond in two important areas, at least, as we get back to normal. I was at 9 o'clock. I got here. That must be when Clayton's Barbershop, which is catty corner across the street from City Hall, was opening up. There must have been 25 people lined up to get their haircut. So you can see that there is a pent-up demand to get back involved in commerce and whatnot. And so what we've decided here in the city of Galion is to support the reopening of small businesses, many of whom didn't receive enough or didn't receive federal dollars through the CARES Act, and really begin a small loan program, which we hope will be administered. I'm pretty confident it'll be administered by the Port Authority, and we're going to provide loans to local businesses. So beginning, I would think, within the next week or 10 days, we'll be in a position to offer those loans, the details of which will go something like this. We really think is about probably a $5,000 per business maximum. We're only going to fund existing businesses that are restarting or have been partially shut down and need to ramp back up. We're looking at being able to provide pretty flexible funds through the port without a collateral requirement, and really looking at providing some revenue for dress shops to restock their shelves, restaurants to buy food inventory. I believe there'll be some businesses that will have a unexpected and can be pretty sizable personal protective equipment costs. So PPE will be something that some businesses may want to utilize, and so that's the plan over the next week or 10 days to make those up to $5,000 loans, zero interest. It's kind of like a credit card arrangement, if you will. What we hope is that the loans will be zero interest, 1 year, kind of same as cash. And I'm very hopeful. I have high expectations that the businesses that utilize the program will be super responsible about making this newly incurred debt to get started one of the first debts they pay. But it won't be something that will come crashing down on them until they've had a chance to get up and running. So we're really starting with a modest $190,000. We think that'll provide up to say 3 dozen of these loans. And I got to tell you, I will go back to council as soon as the gas tank on his loan starts to get towards a quarter fill. We want to be able to make sure that the demand that's out there is met with the money and have as few restrictions as possible. So that's item number one. I'm not sure if there are any questions on that, or anybody from the media have any questions, or I can't, where I'm sitting, I can't see if there's anyone on here at this point. Okay. The other thing that I think is real important to mention that the city council did here that is different than what you see, the response in many other communities, is we're actively supporting our local health department. And while our number of positive COVID cases in the Galion Health District is not overwhelming, we're still, I think, in a position where we're vulnerable, if that's the right word, to a spurtability, that we could have a small outbreak on statewide terms, but a relatively large outbreak of a handful or so cases on a local level. And we want to make sure our health department can respond effectively and in a time efficient way in doing the follow-up contact tracing. So council made available up to $50,000 to the health department to hire, either supplement existing staff, but preferably bring on some contract staff that can be used to do the contact tracing as new cases are identified. So those two big, I consider relatively big pieces of legislation were tackled by Galion City Council, and we'll be in the process of getting that money out to the health department and the Port Authority. The port has a meeting this afternoon to what I expect and what I hope will be approve or agree to go ahead and administer that loan program on behalf of the city. And so I think basically I'd say stay tuned in the next week or so. We should have what I describe as a mini application and try to push out through local media or through this source information about where to apply and when to apply and those sorts of things. So contra to maybe some other things that you're getting out of government about what can't be done or what isn't being done, I think it's real positive that Galion are doing specific steps that can really help in restarting. So it's really the main message we had today. I'll talk just very briefly about the ongoing partnership with Avita. There's, I understand, some public relations, some press information out there involving some information from Avita about what they did at the Avita Foundation with the money that the city had made available to them really about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. But what they did is not to jump the shark or scoop the story, but what they did was purchase, among other things, they purchased an ultraviolet cleaner to clean the rooms at the hospital and various facilities. But I think how it really benefits the community is that that device will be available to do that same ultraviolet cleaning for the city's ambulances and for the city's police cruisers. So I think that's going to be a nice feature. It's a good partnership between the city and the community's largest employer. And it also is pretty cool for the citizens that you never know when you're going to need an ambulance ride. The last thing one would need to, person would want to worry about is whether or not the ambulance that they're in is COVID free. So in Galion, I can assure you that that'll become standard protocol. That's a good thing. Anybody on to ask questions?
No questions. No questions from the media at this time. A couple audience questions though.
Let's do that, then I'll talk about what we're waiting to see about reopening at the end of the month. So go ahead and read me a couple of questions.
First one's from Jason. Do we know when the parks will open?
Yeah, that was what I was going to go to next, Jason. I think we're waiting on the specifics, but we hope to open the pool on June 1st. We are going to be, I haven't really talked to any of the baseball or softball folks, but if you followed, we're waiting for detailed instructions about what are the protocols to open up the parks. But it looks like the 26th is when non-contact or slightly contact sports, which means softball and baseball for the most part in Galion, that can start on the 26th of May. So we are shifting from standby, waiting to see what will happen into kind of overdrive or hyperdrive to get the parks ready, but we're pretty excited about that. We'll post the details of when our playground areas and our parks generally be open. The parks haven't been closed, but we've kept you off the play apparatus. So it's a little bit like going to the candy store and standing outside and not being able to go in and enjoy. So my expectation is by the end of the month, we will have the ability to open the parks. I'll tell you some things we're going to do, and hopefully not over-answer the question here. We have ordered and are waiting for delivery for hand sanitizer dispensers, if you will, for all of the parks. Until they come here, what we intend to do are 3 things at the parks, in the playground areas specifically: hand sanitizer, wipes, and we're going to bring on a professional cleaning in a way that we really haven't done in the past. So whether the professionals are city employees or perhaps some service providers that we're talking to right now. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we'd utilized Waycraft Industries last year to do some neat projects, and so we're going to reach out to them to see if they can assist us with the more day-to-day sanitizing of the playground apparatus. And what we're hoping is that will meet the guidelines that are set out by the state. Last thing I'll say about parks and any of these recreational facilities that are opening up is it's going to be real, and would include concession stands, I imagine. It's going to be real important to work closely with the health department, because while I don't know this yet, they'll be the referees as to whether or not issues of social distancing and whether masks are on necessarily, and whether there is an adequate regime or protocol on cleaning the toys. Those will be some things that we're going to work closely. And if you're going to be involved in youth baseball, youth softball, I think it's going to be real important to reach out and have some conversations about what the health department's going to expect, both in terms of keeping the kids safe and then what sort of social distancing that is going to be required. I think that issue of social distancing is going to be one of the most important in terms of how many people, how many grandparents are allowed at the Little League game, how many parents, brothers and sisters, and those sorts. So to summarize, I'm looking at the end of the month, the 1st of June, to really have the parks ramp up. We'd like on the team sports to be able to make the parks open on the 26th, which is the day after Labor Day, or excuse me, day after Memorial Day. Sorry. Over answer, Jason, but hopefully that covers a lot of those bases. We'll go to the next question.
Sure. Tiffany had a suggestion related to what we just covered.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get some volunteers who can help clean and sanitize park equipment. Maybe have a few people go out before the parks open and when they close.
Yeah, I'm very much open to that. And what I say about volunteers, I've been one over many years myself, is volunteers are great when they're there, but nothing drives somebody crazier than if you're responsible for managing it and the volunteers don't show up. So I think it's a great idea, and we'll try to work to maximize volunteer groups and introduce them to our whatever becomes our necessary cleaning regime. But it's a good idea. I think the point I wanted to make largely is that we're not going to open up the playgrounds or into parks player beware, buyer beware. We're going to do some things to make them as safe as we think is possible and realistic. Another thing I want to talk about, I think it applies, maybe there's a question about the cabins that we rent. Give us a few more hours. The state did not publish the guidelines. If there's still some sort of social distancing limit, the 10-person limit, it's going to make it real difficult to open up the log cabin, the pavilion at the depot and out at Amon's. So what we're hoping for is that those type of 10-person limits may be lifted at least going forward. And we are very anxious, as though, and I know there are a lot of people who are counting on us opening up those facilities for their family events, whether it's graduation parties or things, birthday parties and such during the summer. So we'll be open and ready to go by the end of the month. Let's hope that you're allowed to have more than 10 people at those kind of events. Other thing I want to mention about those facilities that we rent, we have totally changed how we keep those clean. If anybody's done this knows this, that yeah, we pick up after each use, but we really don't clean and sanitize like we are now and like we will be in the future. So we're going to contract with a professional cleaning company, and between the uses, we're going to disinfect those facilities. So I'm not sure what else the state or the health department will recommend that we do, but we're certainly going to start with that. And I'll be honest with you, I'm trying to decide whether or not to jack up the fee. It's going to cost about $35 per cleaning. You know, when we rent it for $75 and you pick up a cleaning cost of $35, you know, I don't want to price out these from our citizens, you know, affordability. So we're gonna try to juggle that, but I would expect some increase in in the cost of using those, at least or until we get some money from the feds, from the state at this point, to handle COVID issues. So I probably will avoid upsetting folks by not getting into that. But there's a lot of money sitting in Columbus that should be in the localities, and the General Assembly is seemingly not interested in it, or the CARES dollars programmed or sent, or program's not the right word, allocated for local governments has now become a $1.2 billion football game in the state budget battle. It's really not acceptable. Senate's passed a bill to allocate some of the money to the localities. I don't think the House is, I don't know if they've had a hearing on it or not. And while our relationship, City of Galion and the mayor's office relationship with our state rep, I'd describe it as excellent. Reardon McLean can't give me an answer that he can't get from the leadership of the House, so he's kind of in a squeeze. And so we haven't heard much back from him, although we've communicated almost daily with his office, trying to understand when they're going to schedule hearings and a vote to allocate at least some of the money that Washington has sent to Columbus for localities to do CARES Act, COVID response. How that ties back to cleaning the recreational facilities is pretty obvious. We don't have in the budget, that kind of money. And one of the things we'd use to get back to normal is use some of those dollars to enhance cleaning and to make our recreational facilities the kind of things that people want to come back out and be part of because they feel safe. So if there are any questions about that, I'd love to. If any of the media have joined in, I'm really curious as to why nobody in the media is asking about what happened to Senate Bill 310 and when those dollars will be freed up and sent to the localities. So I guess it usually works if the media asks me questions. Maybe I'll ask them to ask us questions.
We do actually have a couple questions related to business loans.
Yeah, let's do it.
Jump back to that.
Yeah.
First one came from Jason. Will the loans be available for private clubs in town?
Yeah, I think if you got a tax EIN number, I think the answer is probably yeah. I think that's probably that those businesses have been hit hard too. Don't buy any of those poker punch boards with the money though. That wouldn't be cool. The state might be mad about that. But no, I think the short answer is yes. fraternal clubs, other groups. Yeah, I think it's a first come, first served. We'll see how it goes. And as I said a minute ago, if we are successful in loaning out the first 190,000, I have a pretty good feeling that council will see the need and re-up. It was a unanimous vote in allocating this first chunk of money. So anyway, what else we got?
Travis wanted to know or get clarification, but that also include nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have, that's a something we've thought about, and I don't want to start new initiatives. I'm not sure which Travis that is, but I mean, something that's already existing, we might, but if it's more of a travel and tourism, this is an Oktoberfest, is it?
Yes.
Is it? Yeah, man, I would go to travel and tourism first, but stay tuned. I'd like to get the businesses, quite honestly, the Oktoberfest, I'd like to get the businesses up and running that are needing some money to get going, or other thing will happen. You'll have enough money to start up, but then the customers won't show up and your operating expenses will still be there. So I think we'll have a spurt at the beginning to get some money to get going, and then we'll probably have something a few weeks out when the cash flow doesn't support, but the expenses are still coming in. And the PPP glitters is not all gold. The PPP dries up, and you have to perhaps this local fund will work. So both good questions. I don't know. I'll talk with the Port Authority about that very question this afternoon, and I think they'll be ironing out some rules. So I think it's BS to keep saying stay tuned. We'll get back on that. I think that's an important issue.
Okay, and then Amanda had a question as
Yeah.
far as criteria goes.
Right.
The credit rating of some small businesses has absolutely tanked due to the crisis. Will credit rating be a factor in deciding who is eligible?
Yeah, when I first cooked this idea up, I was calling myself George Bailey. I've gotten away from that a little bit, but if you're familiar with It's a Wonderful Life, really see these loans as having to be similar to that day where there isn't, and so they're not collateralized, as I said before. We're going to have to trust people, and some people will not be able to succeed despite their best efforts, so we may not get paid back. So no, I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to argue with that. I want to be as least like SBA as possible, because while SBA made a nice run with PPP, you're finding out people are involved in it that they almost can't help themselves. Small Business Administration has earned a reputation for being full of rules, regs, and paperwork. And while we don't want to be regulation free or rule free, we want to be paperwork friendly, get this money out so people can order flowers, people can restock their shelves for clothing and whatever it might be. And it's not necessarily an uptown thing, folks, but I imagine there'd be a fair number of uptown businesses that would utilize it. But I think it's commercial, small business throughout the community. I think some of the small home repair businesses, they've been hit pretty hard. And quite honestly, not like state government now, 8-9 weeks into this, now you can apply for unemployment. If you got your own business, the last thing you want to do is be unemployed. That's why you have your own business. So this, we hope, will allow those kinds of small businesses that may not be able to have a strong relationship with the bank, the low credit rating, and get them up and running. That's really the meat and potatoes, or the blood and guts of Galion. We're small towns, small businesses, working class people that would prefer working versus some sort of enhanced unemployment for the state. So instead of giving welfare out to people, why don't we get them back to work? That's the logic behind it. Create opportunity instead of dependence. So I'll stop the rant. Anything else?
Yeah, but it's a new topic.
Okay, let's go.
All right, this one came from Travis on the bike path. Could you explain how it's being built in phases?
I think phases is we've got 1/8 of a mile reality, and vision and hope for the other 2 sections or phases. And it probably is one of the first recreational things that'll be wide open and free of social distancing concerns. Although you won't be able to, ride around piggyback with one another. So I'm real excited about getting it open, hopefully before the 4th of July. The next sections, in the world according to Tom, is that we'll go north from Bucyrus Road, right there where Hesby Drive comes out. And next time you're out there, if you think in your mind's eye, on the west side of Hesby is a flat, there's no sidewalk, but you'll notice that it has been graded so as to allow for a bicycle path. And so that's where we hope it will go up north up to the school, probably turn west at what is the dead end of Highland, and then, and yet to be negotiated with the school, try to carve a path, if you will, going north around the school on the west end of the school property, and then up to Downey Place in the Timberlane area. There's one keep private property up there that we would have to negotiate an easement to get by, and then we would be in the business of acquiring property. Going back up, the school probably is going to charge for their property. I mean, if they donate it, it'd be awesome, but I don't think I'd count on it. And then when you get north to what would be the north end of Timberlane, back of Timberlane Drive there, you'd run east and then north when you get to the end of that field. So then we would, the design, the vision would be to go north to Pico along the property line between Doc Huggins' property, the Dairy Queen, Firelands, the Masonic Temple, and then there's a private property owner, a very successful farmer that has the property to the west. So we'd be negotiating going north down that property line. I think at the south end, Travis, and I'll stop after this, when you get down there, you'll see you're going to be able to ride, although on the road, not my preference, on Hosford and then on to Biddle down to the reservoirs. And so that would be the final section. And we're still working, had an initial conversation with the township about widening the existing road, putting a bike lane on it. And we may come up with a different way to get down to Amons. That would be involving going through where the Olentangy goes down by the Hosford Mill. That could get real expensive, and it also, quite candidly, could destroy some of the natural beauty of what's one of the real cool spots along the Olentangy, just south of the city limits. So that's the vision. Now, you read about like a county-wide bike path and all that kind of stuff. I'm open to that, but that's absolutely visionary. And the first 8/10 we're going to make a reality. And then my hope is that people will see, like, oh wow, we can go ahead and build these next segments, and there'll be a lot of local support for it, a lot of taxpayer support for it. So that's what I got. I think Matt's taking a phone call, so I'm not sure what else we have. I don't have a whole lot, so. Anyways, any questions from the media? No, we do not. Who the fuck is it? So anyway, if that's it, I don't need to prolong this. Important things. Appreciate everyone who's tuned in. I want to thank people that will watch this sometime other than Friday morning. Loan program, anybody in small business that needs a little bit of a boost, tell them to stay tuned. In the next week or two, we'll have the short application process and hopefully have the funds that will time up with reopening of a lot of businesses. We're going to support contact tracing. We're not going to wait for the state to bring in resources. We have an epidemic. And we're real excited about what may be a sooner than later reopening of our city-owned and managed recreational facilities and our parks in general. So with all that, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks with a Facebook on a Monday night before council. Goodbye.